A billionaire duck, a city with no visible workers, a vault filled with gold coins that somehow doesn't crush him when he dives in headfirst. DuckTales was the childhood cartoon we all loved, but what if I told you that it may have secretly shaped how you see money, success, and power? This is the story of DuckTales, like you've never heard it before, a nostalgic deep dive into the hidden messages buried in our childhood. Buckle up, because this adventure might just change how you see your favorite cartoon forever. DuckTales, a billionaire's adventure or an economic lesson in disguise. When DuckTales premiered in 1987, it wasn't just another Saturday morning cartoon. This was Disney's first major foray into weekday syndication, a gamble that paid off enormously. Millions of kids rushed home after school to catch the adventures of Scrooge McDuck and his nephews. But what made DuckTales different from other cartoons of the era? While He-Man was fighting for the power of Grayskull and the Ninja Turtles were battling the Foot Clan, Scrooge and the nephews were hunting for treasure. And that raises an interesting question. Could this childhood favorite have subtly shaped how you think about money today? Let's step back and look at what DuckTales' adventures actually were. Unlike other heroes who saved the world or rescued friends, the Ducks' missions had a clear goal: financial reward. Think about it. From the 5-part Treasure of the Golden Sun to the Golden Fleecing, virtually every DuckTales adventure ended with finding gold, gems, or priceless artifacts. They weren't exploring ancient ruins for knowledge or discovery. They were there for profit. When Scrooge's eyes lit up at the sight of treasure, so did ours. The show brilliantly connected the thrill of adventure with the joy of profit. Without even realizing it, we absorbed a powerful message. Exploration equals treasure. Discovery equals wealth. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a specifically capitalist thing. What makes a capitalist? The core principle of capitalism is pursuing profit through private ownership. In DuckTales, Scrooge's expeditions aren't funded by museums for education, but privately financed to increase his personal fortune. The treasures don't become public artifacts. They become private property. While other adventure stories focused on saving people or protecting nature, DuckTales focused on who got to keep the gold. Every time we cheered when Scrooge found another treasure, we were learning to see wealth as the happy ending of a great adventure. So what specific messages about wealth were DuckTales sending? To understand this better, we need to look closer at Scrooge McDuck himself, the richest duck in the world. Scrooge McDuck, self-made billionaire or capitalist myth? Scrooge McDuck has one of the most famous mantras in cartoon history. I made my fortune by being tougher than the toughies and smarter than the smarties, and I made it square. It's a catchphrase that encapsulates the American dream, the self-made billionaire who earned every penny through hard work and ingenuity. But is this realistic, or just a billionaire myth repackaged for kids? In DuckTales, Scrooge is framed as an honest, hard-working tycoon who earned his wealth through determination and clever thinking. And that's just a comforting narrative, isn't it? The idea that massive wealth is just a natural reward for being exceptional? But in the real world, most billionaires don't just work harder than everyone else. The reality is much more complex. Family connections, resource access, and financial systems all play crucial roles in building fortunes. This complexity is precisely what DuckTales omits from its narrative. If we were to see an honest portrayal of wealth creation, we'd expect to see the mechanism supporting Scrooge's empire: the workers, infrastructure, and production systems. Yet something curious happens when we look at Duckburg itself. Despite Scrooge's global business empire, we only see him, his family, and a handful of employees. This strange absence of a workforce hints at something deeper in DuckTales' economic worldview, something we'll explore more fully later when we examine Duckburg's missing working class. For now, though, we can see a crucial gap in the DuckTales narrative. Wealth is rarely created in isolation. Every fortune, even a fictional duck fortune, depends on systems, other people's labor, and often luck. While we were busy singing along to the theme song, we were also absorbing the idea that exceptional individuals create wealth through adventure and cleverness. But Scrooge isn't just rich, he's also a hero, kind to his family, honest in his dealings, and generally portrayed positively, which brings us to his enemies. If Scrooge represents good capitalism, what do his villains represent? The villains, greedy thieves or working class rebels. Every hero needs a villain, and in DuckTales, all of Scrooge's enemies want one thing: his money. But are they really villains, or just people trying to break into a system rigged against them? Let's look at who Scrooge fights and what they might represent. First, the Beagle Boys. Bumbling criminals constantly trying to break into Scrooge's money bin. From another perspective, aren't they just responding to extreme wealth inequality? The show presents a world where one duck can literally swim in money while others struggle. The Beagle Boys' methods are wrong, but the show never questions whether Scrooge's fortune, more money than he could ever spend, represents its own moral problem. In a society with limited resources, extreme wealth concentration necessarily means less for others, even if legally acquired. The stark inequality is never addressed. Then there's Flint Heart Glomgold, Scrooge's bitter rival and the second richest duck in the world. Glomgold is Scrooge's dark mirror, wealthy but without a moral compass. Where Scrooge follows rules, Glomgold cheats to surpass his rival's fortune. The show makes the moral judgment simple. Glomgold is bad because he cheats, while Scrooge is good because he plays fair. But DuckTales never asks if the rules themselves might be unfair. And let's not forget Magica the Spell, the sorceress obsessed with Scrooge's #1 dime, believing this single coin holds magical properties that will make her all-powerful. Isn't this a perfect metaphor for the illusion of the one secret to success? Sold to working-class people, the idea that there's some magic shortcut to wealth if you just find the right trick, rather than acknowledging systemic barriers? What's fascinating is how DuckTales subtly reinforces that Scrooge deserves his wealth, and anyone trying to take it is either foolish, evil, or both. The moral framework of the show is built around protecting private property, Scrooge's private property. But there's something even more curious about Duckburg's economy that most of us never noticed as kids. Where are all the actual workers? DuckTales' invisible workforce. Where are the workers? Duckburg is portrayed as a thriving economy with banks and businesses. Scrooge himself owns multiple companies. But if Scrooge is a billionaire, who's creating his wealth? Who's doing the labor that powers his fortune? Scrooge has only a handful of visible employees. Launchpad McQuack, his pilot, Duckworth, his butler, and Fenton Crackshell, his accountant, also known as the superhero Gizmo Duck. They never complain about wages or working conditions. They're happy to serve, but none seem to be getting richer despite working for the world's wealthiest duck. In real economies, workers generate value through labor, but in DuckTales, wealth just exists. It's in ancient temples waiting to be discovered or piled up in Scrooge's money bin. The working class is virtually invisible except as comic relief or minor characters. This absence creates a fantasy where money appears without production, gold coins to dive into without mines, factories, or labor. While other adventure shows might ignore economics entirely, DuckTales puts wealth front and center while erasing how it's created. This makes capitalism seem like a treasure hunt rather than a system built on workers producing value. The show's portrayal of a workforce-free economy likely shaped how many of us initially understood business and wealth, as something magical rather than structural. We see the consequences of this thinking today. The self-made billionaire myth remains powerful despite evidence to the contrary. Many adults believe in hustle culture and overnight success stories, downplaying systems, privilege, and labor. We idolize tech CEOs as lone geniuses instead of recognizing the thousands of workers behind them. Even the modern obsession with cryptocurrency echoes Scrooge's treasure hunting, the fantasy that wealth can be discovered rather than produced through collective effort. These aren't just DuckTales' fault, but the show was part of a media landscape that normalized these perspectives. But what happens when money enters a society that doesn't use it? Interestingly, DuckTales answered that question in perhaps its most thought-provoking episode, the Land of Tra-La-La episode, DuckTales' anti-capitalist moment. In a rare moment of economic critique, DuckTales gave us the Land of Tra-La-La, a story that asks what happens when capitalism invades a money-free society. In this episode, Scrooge is stressed by endless demands for his money. After a nervous breakdown, his doctor recommends finding a place where money doesn't exist. Scrooge discovers Tra-La-La, a peaceful Himalayan valley where people live in harmony without currency. At first, Scrooge is delighted by this money-free paradise. The locals share freely and have no concept of greed. But things go wrong when Scrooge's accountant, Fenton Crackshell, accidentally introduces bottle caps to the valley. The locals, who have never had currency before, suddenly begin assigning value to these worthless objects. A farmer demands 6 bottle caps for his sheep. Another wants 10 for his cow. Soon, the entire valley is obsessed with accumulating bottle caps. Inflation skyrockets, greed corrupts the system, and their once peaceful society falls into chaos. Scrooge tries to fix the mess by making it rain bottle caps, flooding the market to make them worthless. But this only causes more problems, culminating in environmental damage and the ducks nearly executed. By the end, even after Scrooge and his nephews are exiled, the damage is done. The episode ends with a clear message. When money enters a community, it changes everything. The once peaceful Tra-La-La society is forever altered by the introduction of currency. The storyline is surprisingly critical for a children's show from the 1980s. It suggests that monetary systems themselves can corrupt harmonious communities. But was this one moment of self-awareness enough to balance the rest of the show's messaging? And how does the original DuckTales compare to its more recent incarnation, the 2017 reboot? A more self-aware Scrooge? In 2017, DuckTales was rebooted for a new generation, and Scrooge McDuck was reimagined. But why did Disney update him? What changed between 1987 and 2017 in how we view billionaires? The reboot softened Scrooge's image, making him more of a quirky, flawed adventurer. His wealth is portrayed as a byproduct of his adventures rather than his primary motivation. The reboot introduced Mark Beeks, a tech billionaire parody driven by social media fame and greed. Unlike Scrooge, Beeks has no ethics. He's a commentary on modern tech billionaires who accumulate wealth without producing value. The new version also explores why Scrooge values money. Each coin represents an adventure, a memory, a triumph. His money bin is more a museum of his life than a vault. These changes reflect shifting attitudes. Modern audiences are more skeptical of the ultra-rich. As wealth inequality has become more visible, the fantasy of the benevolent billionaire needed update. Let's return to our original question. Did DuckTales condition a generation to idolize wealth and embrace capitalist ideals? The evolution from the 1987 version to the 2017 reboot suggests there was indeed economic messaging that required updating for modern audiences with different views on wealth. Clearly, Scrooge McDuck wasn't just a hero who happened to be rich. His wealth was central to his identity. But whether he was primarily a lovable character who taught us about adventure or a subtle ambassador for capitalism depends on how we view the show in its cultural context. DuckTales premiered in 1987, during the Reagan era of economic and cultural transformation. Reaganomics championed deregulation, tax cuts for the wealthy, and trickle-down economics. The 1980s saw Wall Street glorified. Remember Gordon Gekko declaring greed is good? Yuppie culture rising, and entrepreneurship celebrated. This was also the final decade of the Cold War. Anti-communist sentiment remained strong, and capitalism wasn't just an economic system, it was positioned as America's moral identity against the Soviet Union. Children's media rarely showed alternative economic systems except as threats. Even the Land of Tra-La-La, despite critiquing money's corrupting influence, ultimately showed capitalism was inevitable once introduced. DuckTales emerged from this environment where free markets and individual success were celebrated as American virtues. The show reflected and reinforced these values in a kid-friendly format. Scrooge McDuck, with his self-made fortune, embodied the Reagan-era ideal, even as he taught us about adventure, family, and occasional moderation. What does this mean for us? Some will say DuckTales was harmless fun, just ducks having adventures. They'll argue children weren't analyzing economic subtext, they were just enjoying the ride. Others will say it shaped how a generation viewed wealth and success, that cheering for Scrooge to find gold taught us that treasure-hunting capitalism was heroic. As one media scholar noted, DuckTales presented Scrooge's quest as adventure capitalism, where thrilling exploits led to financial profit. The show wasn't alone. Richie Rich, Tailspin, and even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles all contained economic narratives we absorbed unconsciously. The beauty of revisiting childhood favorites as adults is appreciating them on multiple levels. We can enjoy the nostalgia while thinking critically about the messages they contain. DuckTales remains a brilliantly crafted adventure series with unforgettable characters and a theme song that will never leave your head. Its legacy as entertainment is secure, but perhaps its greatest value now is as a time capsule, a window into how we once viewed wealth and adventure, and how those views have evolved. Life is like a hurricane, but is capitalism the storm? We just discovered how DuckTales might have shaped an entire generation's view on wealth and success through adventures about a duck who swims in money. Disney didn't stop there. What if I told you that another beloved character who shared the same universe as Scrooge McDuck was potentially doing something even more interesting with how we view heroes and identity? In our next video, we'll look behind Darkwing Duck's mask to reveal whether this caped crusader was a daring superhero or a delusional narcissist living in a fantasy world. You'll see Let's Get Dangerous in a whole new light, and discover how these cartoons shaped your understanding of ego, heroism, and self-image. So hit subscribe and click the notification bell now. It's time to get dangerous with your childhood nostalgia.